Okay, hello everyone and welcome to today's panel discussion, Close Encounters, Futurisms in Contemporary Art. My name is Anik Glaude. I'm the curator at the Varley Art Gallery of Markham and one of your hosts for today's discussion. I can't forget to generally thank our sponsors for today, the Varley Mackay Art Foundation of Markham and TD Bank Group, as well as the gallery's funders, Ontario Arts Council, the province of Ontario, and of course, the city of Markham. So this webinar is being recorded. You also have the option to turn on the closed captioning feature and are encouraged to use your Q&A chat box to ask any questions you might have throughout the talk. Let me just bring up the first. So I'd like to start today with a light acknowledgement. So from the gallery in Markham, Ontario, we acknowledge the communities in Circle, the north, west, south, and eastern directions, and the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Seneca, the Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit people. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. And for myself, as a 12th generation settler, I would just like to recognize the impact that my family has had, namely in resource extraction. So thank you so much. So today, the agenda will start with a few introductions. Then each of us, so myself, Brendan, and Syrus, will present on our work. We'll then go into a group conversation, not super formal, just, you know, Star Trek fans talking about Star Trek stuff. And finally, we will have a Q&A from the audience, and then we've left a buffer about 15 minutes to do what we would like. So without further ado, I will introduce the chair of the panel. So Dr. Marissa Largo is an assistant professor of creative technologies in the School of Arts, Media, Performance, and Design of York University. Her research and creation focus on the intersection of community engagement, race, gender, and Asian diasporic cultural production. Her forthcoming book, Unsettling Imaginaries, Filipinx Contemporary Artists in Canada, examined the work of oral histories of artists who imagine Filipinx subjectivity beyond colonial logics. Dr. Largo has received numerous awards and grants for her research and creative practice. I was very fortunate to work with her in her 2021 curatorial project, Elusive Desires, Nestle and Florency, which was presented at the gallery in 2021. It was also recognized by Gallery Ontario Galleries with an award for Best Exhibition Design and Installation and Best Curatorial Writing Text. Dr. Largo is part of a team developing the New Creative Technologies BFA program at the York University Markham campus, which will open this fall. So it was a really interesting kind of pairing for us to come together today in honor of To Go Boldly, but also of York U's new campus opening. I will stop sharing and invite Marissa to share.
Thank you, Anik. That was a lovely introduction. This is a fantastic opportunity to hold space and time with these two amazing artists, and Anik, who is a spectacular artist. As she mentioned in her opening, I did have the pleasure to work with her on Elusive Desires. And as your neighbor, my backdrop is the new York University Markham campus, which is set to open its doors this September, and just south from the Varley Art Gallery of Markham. And so I look forward to being in the hood and collaborating with Anik wherever possible. So I am pleased today to engage in discussion with my colleagues today and to squeeze in as many Star Trek puns as possible. I am assistant professor of creative technologies, and part of a team developing a creative technologies program. It's a new BFA program, and it applies creativity, collaboration, and entrepreneurship to address problems in fast-pacing industries such as disruptive technologies, virtual worlds, and ethical applications of artificial intelligence. Creative technologies focuses on the development of multidisciplinary skills and technological expertise through hands-on learning with an emphasis on social applications and settings. Our students will have the opportunity to collaborate on research and digital projects that create solutions that contribute to industry, scholarship, and community. They will gain practical experience such as technology for fabrication, media processes, digital content creation, virtual environments, and more. And we'll also have exciting theory and history courses, such as my course called Futurisms from the Margins, which examines speculative aesthetics of Indigenous and people of color artists, particularly my area of research, which is on Filipinx futurism. So I'm really looking forward to that. Your university's motto is Write the Future. And this is a call for creative thinkers and makers to use their skills, imagination, and ethics to create a world in which they want to live. York's institutional ambition, I believe, shares similar impulses as artists who adopt speculative fiction and aesthetics in their practice. The artists and practitioners of our talk today, for example. Speculative aesthetics through creative technologies has, I believe, the potential to give rise to decolonial futures. And so, you know, a lot of Indigenous and Black and people of color artists are using speculative aesthetics in their work to engage with aesthetic and political modes of world making, particularly during a time of climate crisis, racial injustice, class struggle, and gender prejudice. Exploring space has long been a metaphor for colonial discovery, extractivism, and Western imperialism. Star Trek, however, offers us a science fiction mythology that offers what I would argue a blueprint for decolonial futures. Starfleet's mission was to, quote, seek out new life and new civilizations. But Starfleet was guided by Starfleet General Order Number 1, also known as the Prime Directive, which is the principle of non-interference. So, you know, I ask, how can this be paralleled to nation relations as dictated by treaties such as the 3 wampum belts, the 1 bowl, 2 row, and the friendship belt, which are among the first treaty agreements between First Nations and later between the Haudenosaunee and European settlers. We know these treaties were time and time again violated by European settlers. So I ask, how does Star Trek and its lore provide blueprints for good relations among and between people and nations? How does the Star Trek universe offer a speculative of aesthetics to imagine better futures with the ecosystem, technology, and each other? The artists of the Varleys, to go boldly, engage in such inquiries through the mythologies and visualities of Star Trek to convey a pop culture, fun and critical vision of the future that grapples with social oppression, climate crisis, and technological progress. So this panel today examines how artists and curators envision the future that they want to live in. So the first to present is Brendan Lee Satish Tang. And I will begin by reading Brendan's bio. Brendan Lee Satish Tang, born in Dublin, Ireland in 1975, is a renowned contemporary ceramic artist celebrated for his fusion of traditional Asian motifs with futuristic robotic aesthetics. Growing up in Canada, Tang pursued a BFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and an MFA from the Southern Illinois University. His acclaimed Manga or Molu series juxtaposes intricate porcelain works with elements inspired by Japanese manga and modern technology. Tang's innovative approach has earned him international recognition with exhibitions across North America and beyond. His work explores themes of cultural hybridity, identity, and globalization, challenging conventional boundaries in ceramic art. And I recently saw the show, and what magnificent pieces, Brendan. So it's an honor and pleasure to hear from the mouth of the artist himself.
Thank you for that warm introduction. I am currently in Vancouver. I'm broadcasting in from Vancouver, the home of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh folks. And it's a total treat to be here. So I am going to share, let's see if I can do this seamlessly. I'm going to share this screen here. Um, Let me know if it works.
Looks great.
Is there, is it working? Are we
Yep.
getting the whole picture? Amazing. Oh, I'm assuming that's a Marissa, that's a high five. Um, so this is my Let's Fly. So it might be a bit of a drinking game to see how many Star Trek references I can sort of fit into this. It might be a bit early actually. Let's Fly. Oh, sorry, there's construction around in this area. So my first other acknowledgement is how nerdy my family is. I come from a family of four boys in total, and all of us, it was a rambunctious house except for when the next generation was on, and we are big fans. There's my little brother and I at the Star Trek exhibit here in Vancouver at the Peony Theater or Peony grounds, and I also play Star Trek role-playing games and all that sort of good stuff. I put in this picture of the Ferengi ears because that is my one regret I did not purchase was some Star Trek Ferengi ears. All right. So the work today, I'm going to talk specifically about the two works that I have in the show, and this is Mango Ormolu version 4.1-B, which is in the show. And for the show, I referred to there it is in situ next to the other sculpture that I made for the show. Um, but this is a piece that belongs to a larger series of Mango Ormolu works you'll notice that the Mango Ormolu titles, I have like version 4.1-B, and then there's A and all this sort of stuff. And I was using sort of the language that they use for describing software updates and that sort of thing. And so this was a version that I included in there. And specifically, what was interesting about this version was I wanted to allude to the idea that there was some sort of containment or some sort of something that was breaching the object when it was being squeezed or things are being pulled out from it. Um, so the ideas around including this in the show, I had been thinking about the sort of black ooze, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, how does this work sort of fit within that context? And I think it's from its general inspiration. And of course, we can start talking about Star Trek, but I think with this piece specifically, when I started making it, I was thinking about this is attempts to contain evil, and that's what I retitled the work for this show. And I wanted to kind of go into the inspiration around that sort of black ooze. But before I start referencing Star Trek, I'm gonna have to start referencing Lost. And so when I made this work, I was an avid fan of the show Lost and the way the storytelling was told in that show, and how so much can be kind of hung on a hook of just what that question is. And so one of those questions was about the smoke monster and what the smoke monster in the show was, and it became like this object of evil or embodiment, which then kind of referenced this piece. But then as more I thought about it, I then recalled, of course, that episode, The Skin of Evil, the episode where we all collectively lost Tasha Yar to the gooey oil monster, where the actor wanted to be written out of the script. They did so very unceremoniously. I think they did a Game of Thrones move before Game of Thrones even did it. So I was thinking a lot about like that black ooze and like these ideas of embodiment of evil or something that was kind of being squeezed out of these objects. At the time, I was thinking, and I still continue to think about these objects as metaphors for culture or identity, and kind of thinking about that how an object is more than just an object. It's representative. It's a symbol of these sorts of things. And so that's where that work kind of came out of. The next piece, this one is called Move Along Home, Cardassians, and it is a dice tower, which is also included with some dice. And so, one thing that I really love about Star Trek is their material culture. As an object maker myself, I love the objects that show up on this show, from the Ryza statues to Cisco's baseball to the flutes, to the masks, all these sorts of things. And I think, that's obviously like a trope of Hollywood, like props are important, but for me as a maker, I feel like these objects have specific significance within the storytelling. Odo's bucket. Everybody who watches DS9 will understand that object, and I feel like they kind of transcend just simple props. So I kind of wanted to explore that with the object that I made with one of the Star Trek series that I really appreciated, which is Deep Space Nine. And the one of the reasons why I love Deep Space Nine is that in a weird kind of way, it kind of indirectly started talking about colonialism and maybe like a post-colonial world where the Cardassian group of folks took over Bajor, and then in a treaty, they had to leave Bajor, and they left the space station that was outside of the planet Bajor, and the Bajorans took that over. And you get to see a lot of back and forth between those two communities. And I thought they kind of, for the time, started wrestling more with these ideas around a post-colonial world, a lot better than like the original Star Trek series probably dealt with. But I think there was something that I really responded to there. And so I wanted to kind of create this object, which is a dice tower that is inspired by the Cardassian home world architecture, which is kind of like a curvilinear brutalist kind of style, if I were to sort of give a name to it. And I was kind of riffing off of that, like making an object that you may find in a household in Cardassia, um, and kind of playing into that object culture. And then specifically, this is a dice tower. And so this is a Venn diagram between my art practice, my love of Star Trek, and my board game hobby. And so if anybody's ever played role-playing games, they might be familiar with this object. You drop the dice at the top of that object, and it kind of goes in and hits all the different sides and spits them out randomized. And you're probably wondering, well, isn't that what you're shaking your hands is doing? Well, yes, but this is, a fun little chance object. And so inside that ceramic object are these tiers that bounce the dice off the walls and roll out more randomized. So I created that object. And then I was referencing this very strange, terrible episode called Move Along Home, where it was a first contact with a meeting with a community of aliens, and their whole jam was is that they talked through board games, or they did business through board games. And so they played this game, which actually somehow took the crew and put them into the game. But the alien was playing this game with Quark in his bar, uh and they kind of moved these pieces around, and it affected the people that were there, or affected the cast members. So it's a very strange sort of Alice in Wonderland kind of show. But what I really liked about that is that there was this sort of move along home. I love the title of it and the strangeness of it. And but it also, I felt like there was like an interesting sort of call, especially with the move along home, comma Cardassians. uh it's kind of almost like, it kind of gives me like vibes of like the land back movement. It's like move along home. It's like give us our land back, or give us our space back in this context. And the idea of gameplay. I think as an artist who tries not to make all his hobbies his practice, which is painfully hard. I often when I'm playing role-playing games, I'm often thinking about how those are interesting spaces for collective storytelling and problem solving, and I find it a very interesting way to circumvent like heavier issues. And I felt like even with speculative fiction, they do the same sort of thing. So this is the dice tower in various different aspects of it. And that's all. I just want to touch on those ones, but I just want to thank some of the places that I sourced some of these. These are the wormholes essentially I fell into when I was Googling this presentation. But I will now pass it on over.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
No problem.
That was fantastic. Um, so we'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of all of the presentations. So to our audience, please keep note. And our next artist is Dr. Syrus Marcus Ware. Dr. Syrus Marcus Ware is a Vanier scholar, visual artist, activist, curator, and educator. Syrus is an assistant professor at the School of the Arts, McMaster University. Using drawing, installation, and performance, Syrus works with and explores social justice frameworks with and Black activist culture. His work has been shown widely, including solo shows at Tangled Art and Disability in 2022, Random Access Memory, Grunt Gallery in 2018, 2068, Touch Change, and Will Abale Art Projects in 2021, Irresistible Revolutions. His work has been featured as part of the inaugural Toronto Biennale of Art in both 2019 and 2022, in conjunction with the Ryerson Image Center, as well as for the Bentways Safety in Public Spaces initiative in 2020. The exhibition was called Radical Love. He is part of the PDA, which stands for Performance Disability Art Collective, and co-programmed Crip Your World, an intergalactic queer POC sick and disabled extravaganza as part of Mayworks 2014. Cyrus's recent curatorial projects include That's So Gay at the Gladstone Hotel, 2016 to 2019, Repurpose at the Robert McLaughlin Gallery, 2014, and the Church Street Mural Project at the Church Wellesley Village in 2013. Syrus is also co-curator of The Cycle, a 2-year disability arts performance initiative of the National Arts Center. Please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming Syrus Marcus Ware.
Hello, everyone. Peace and long life. Live long and prosper. It's so great to be here today. I'm just going to get my screen ready to share, and we'll just get started. So it's a thrill to get to be here today. I'm coming to you from Tuggerandeau, from the part of Tuggerandeau that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase, making this unceded territory up in the Mississauga of the Credit. This image on the screen is an image from a speculative fiction work I created called Antarctica, or Mary Birdland, Freedom, for the Toronto Biennial of Art. And it's set in well, it is sometime between the year 2028 and 2050. There's a series of things that happen with this beautiful throuple of Black and BIPOC disabled folks who are invited, told to go and colonize Antarctica. So that's just what the image was at the beginning. So I've been an artist who's been really interested in speculative fiction as a possibility space for prefiguring and imagining distant futures and the kinds of futures that we're working to build towards. As an artist, I'm somebody who is rooting my work in social justice frameworks and in activist culture. I'm an activist and have been an artist and activist for both about 27 years, and have really loved the way that art and activism can inspire irresistible revolutions, as Tony Cade-Bambara suggested in 1982, that we can make work that it makes people want to change the world. And so I, of course, have used speculative fiction in a lot of approaches to help people to see the kind of future that we're building towards. And I'm drawn to this quote by Walida and Marissa, which is from a book that she wrote called Octavia's Brood, which is an anthology of writing all inspired by Octavia Butler, a Black speculative fiction writer, and huge Star Trek fan. She loved Star Trek. Octavia Butler loved Star Trek so much that she wrote to Gene Roddenberry regularly and told him what she thought of his plot, storylines, and his character development. But anyways, Octavia Butler was a Black speculative fiction writer who inspired many. And in Octavia's Brood, it's all BIPOC artists writing in the spirit and in the vein of Octavia Butler. So in this book, Walida and Marissa, writing about speculative fiction, she said that in fact, all activists should use speculative fiction as a venue to explore their ideas, because she said this: whenever we try to envision a world without war, without violence, without prisons, without capitalism, we are engaging in speculative fiction. All organizing in speculative fiction, of course, because we're daring to in both situations, we're daring to dream that another world is possible. And she says, all organizing is speculative fiction. What better venue for organizers to explore their work than science fiction stories? We get to practice the future by working in futuristic ways. So the work that I created for To Go Boldly is this large-scale wall work called Black Girl Magic that really celebrates and honors some of the great Black characters on the show, including Lieutenant Uhura, Captain Michael Burnham, and Guinan from The Next Generation. But I'll tell you a bit more about the work in a moment. So I'm an artist who works a lot with portraiture. I love the possibility of using drawing and using large-scale portraiture as a way to recenter the frame of who we consider to be inherently valuable around maybe people who have been under-recognized in the milieu or have been marginalized in our social world. And so I've been really interested in drawing portraits of activists and drawing portraits of people who are helping us to imagine changing the world and who are actually doing the work to do it. So these are some examples of some of the drawings that I've been making for the last 10 years. And they're very large scale, 12 foot tall, about 5 or 6 feet wide. You can kind of see it with the scale here of Queen Titi Opaleki in front of her portrait. But just working with graphite and paper and, drawing these portraits that celebrated people and got to capture moments of things like Black queer joy, Black crip joy, activist joy, that got to show the relationality between communities and folks coming together. So I've been working with this idea of portraiture and this idea of drawing to recenter the frame around who we consider to be inherently valuable at a time when there's been an increasing disregard for Black life, for the culture of dissent, the right to dissent and to be involved in activist organizing in this moment. So it's been really profound to be able to work in this method. I started moving and playing with the portraits and making wallpapers maybe about six or 7 years ago, and started playing with this idea of creating literally an environment in the wall work where there's a different set of rules of engagement, a different set of commitments that we're making to each other. And in these wallpaper environments, activists are often together, maybe sometimes people who have never even met each other, and they're engaged and connected in an environment that is inherently affirming to Black life, that is inherently rooted in joy, that is supportive of Black justice. So these become these futuristic spaces where a different set of conditions are possible. I wanted to know what would happen and how would our days be different if we woke up and started our day by looking at like a big wallpaper or a wall work of, maybe speculative fiction characters, or maybe activists in our community, or maybe the possibility that it is, in fact, an option to change the world. How would we start our day differently? Then, for example, what we normally see now, which is maybe padding into our bathroom to take our shower and seeing wallpaper with just sort of bucolic themes of Elizabethan royalty on swings, which is sort of what people have on the wallpaper now. So I was playing with this idea of wallpaper, started making lots of large-scale wall work, playing with the drawings and working with, this one has botanical drawing. This is, of course, a portrait of Ida B. Wells, so historic activists, and just playing with this idea of creating these different kinds of environments where different possibilities were present. So the idea of the wall work was something that I knew I wanted to bring into this exhibition, this idea of creating a big celebration and honoring of those who I considered to be inherently valuable, and these were these Black characters in Star Trek. So for me, Star Trek was similarly to Brendan, a very family affair. We didn't agree on a lot of things, but we very much agreed on Star Trek, and we watched Star Trek Next Generation every day in syndication before supper and after supper, and then the once a week new episode that came out we would watch, and that day was a lot of Star Trek. And I remember watching this particular episode riveted in 1991. It was an episode called The Outcast. It was the 117th episode of Star Trek Next Generation. It was in the 5th season. And it was this episode where the Enterprise crew goes to a planet where there's no gender. We go to a planet where there's no gender and there's no, I guess, what would be considered heterosexuality, for lack of a better word, or sort of different pairings of people coming together. Everything is genderless and gender neutral. And it was this way for them to code this conversation about this queer revolution that was happening in the moment. The March on Washington for Queer Rights and Justice, the changes to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy with the US military, the increasing visibility of queer characters on TV and movies were all happening at this moment. And a young Syrus was coming out for the first time to my family in 1991 at 14. And when I came out to my family, it didn't go well. There was a lot of homophobia, a lot of violence. It was really unfortunate. And yet there we sat watching this episode together. And I remember the electricity in the room because, of course, it was talking about this thing that was very present in our family, but that we didn't seem to have the skills or the ability to work through or talk through together. So this episode captured me, and I was like, what is this show? I am really interested in the possibilities of what we can talk about if we just set the conversation outside of our current timeline, space-time continuum of our current moment. And so I was really, really interested. So this episode really stands out. And then, of course, there's the characters. The characters of seeing these beautiful Black characters every week on my screen writ large. Of course, Guinan was a key feature in Star Trek Next Generation. I think Whoopi Goldberg actually wrote to the team that was rebooting Star Trek for the Next Generation and said, look, Nancy Nichols, Uhura, I need to be on the show, write me in any role. So they made her the bartender of 10 Forward. And we actually don't, the work that I made for this work is called Black Girl Magic, but we actually don't know a lot about Guinan's gender. Her gender is not really discussed, although we know she uses she, her pronouns. But anyways, Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, huge character. He's one of the oldest characters on the show. Her people live for maybe thousands of years. Aside from an Elorian, I think, who's on Discovery, who's maybe infinite, and Q, of course. Guinan is one of the oldest characters on the show. Of course, she was inspired to want to. Whoopi Goldberg was inspired to want to join the cast because of Uhura, and of course, watching Uhura on the original series, and of course now seeing this version of Uhura through the show Strange New World was so inspirational to me as a young person to see that the first black and white kiss on TV was on Star Trek, and my family was in this mixed race family of Black and white family members coming together. And then, of course, now with Michael Burnham being the captain of Discovery and taking us into this new journey, 1,000 years ahead of where the show first starts when they get thrust forward into time. So I was really interested in capturing these beautiful, incredible characters and celebrating them and honoring them in this style that I had been using of both the portraiture and the wallpaper. So I created this whole work, Black Girl Magic, Black People Magic, I don't know, Guinan's gender, that had images, drawings of Uhura, drawings of Michael Burnham, and drawings of Guinan in this very sort of subtle approach, because I wanted it to kind of be like a dark on dark. Sorry, this is a bit granulated because this is just a screen grab, but a dark on dark sort of treatment with these pops of color and this sort of vibrancy where there's this repetition and this sort of over and over again repetition of these characters. So I was really excited to offer this work and this way of kind of honoring and celebrating these Black characters who were so significant in my journey and in my story. And in these characters' lives, I mean, they weren't the only Black characters. In this image here of Guinan, he's talking to LeVar Burton, she's talking to Geordie. So there was lots of Black characters, and it was just so wonderful that there was all of these Black women and Black femme coded people leading and having main character vibe in the show. So to me, Star Trek has been a huge part of my life. It was a huge part of my journey and my story. Sitting watching that episode of The Outsiders, was so incredible in that moment of time in my family, and then turning back again and again to Star Trek as a source, as a resource, as a friend, and as a family as I went through the journey of my life. To go back to Walida and Marisha's quote, what better venue for activists to explore their stories than speculative fiction? I've been fundamentally inspired by Star Trek as a possibility model. When we think about all of the things that have been created in our social world that are rooted in episodes on Star Trek, from the tricorder to the way that we scan things to flat screen electronic devices that we can connect our content from. There's so much that gets inspired through this, and I love the idea that speculative fiction can be a possibility model for helping people to imagine a different kind of future. So if we say we want to build a future where all life is, inherently valuable, where the environment is cared for, where Black people and trans people and disabled, deaf, and mad people get to live long enough to become elders, get to play sports, get to be out in public and use the washroom, and all of the things that we know we want to have in order to have a just society. If we want to get there, some people are having a hard time imagining the steps. So we can use speculative fiction to quite literally paint a picture, make a wall work, create a sculpture that helps people to imagine the future that we're trying to get to. So that's what I'm on about. I will definitely say it's been amazing to get to see that there are so many other Trekkie artists out there, and that we're all making work that's inspired by Star Trek in these ways. When Anik and I first connected, I just want to say I had been posting on social media about my Star Trek tarot deck. And it's just amazing to me how ubiquitous and how full of our lives the Star Trek phenomenon is. So it's been a real honor to get to be part of this work and to get to be part of this legacy. And I will say peace and long life, live long and prosper.
Thank you so much, Syrus. What a joy-filled and an awe-inspiring presentation. Next up, we have Anik Glaude, the intrepid curator of To Go Boldly. Anik is a Franco-Ontarian and 12th generation settler who lives in Toronto, Ontario. Her practice is centered around collaboration, relationship building, and making art accessible to a wide audience. As an institutional curator, she aims to rectify imbalances within our sector by centering the voices of women, Indigenous, Black, and culturally diverse, and artists from 2S LGBTQ+ community. She applies a critical lens to collection-based exhibitions, exposing the colonial legacy of museums, as well as challenging their role in contemporary society. She is the recipient of several awards from Galleries Ontario Galleries, which including the award for innovations in the collections-based exhibition for Field Notes in 2023. And it is my pleasure to introduce Anik, close collaborator and neighbor now. And so please, without further ado.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Marissa, can you give me the thumbs up?
All good.
Perfect. So thank you so much again to Brendan and Syrus. Even today, your presentations are so inspiring, even though the show is up, but I guess that's a lifelong thing. So this project, To Go Boldly, began with a straightforward question. Can Star Trek, the iconic pulp culture franchise and science fiction phenomenon, be the focus of a contemporary art exhibition? Over the years, I've encountered several artists, Brendan among them, who have referenced Star Trek in their work. However, these references were often incidental or part of a larger series where Star Trek was not the focal point. So where do I start? Would artists be willing to participate in this curatorial experiment? Would it be well received? Is now a good time? So I thought I would chat a bit about the inspiration for the show, namely the kind of research that allowed me to imagine and bring this show into the real world. So for several decades, and Marissa has alluded to this in the intro, the influence of science fiction and futurism in contemporary artistic discourse has notably accelerated. So on the left, we see the 2020 anthology Science Fiction, part of Whitechapel's Gallery's Documents of Contemporary Art series. Editor Dan Burr-Smith explores several reasons for this growing impact. Artists have increasingly adopted tropes, themes, and methodologies from science fiction to address urgent societal issues, including technological change, global urbanization, evolving social structures, non-human life, and the pressing evidence of climate change. All issues that are of interest to me, and some of which I've explored in other exhibitions. As a lifelong science fiction fan, I resonate with how artists tackle these complex topics, employing a vocabulary that transcends traditional, quote, contemporary art discourses and speaks to me on a different wavelength. So what intrigued me the most about Burr-Smith's text was the idea that science fiction is not merely a genre to adopt, but can also be understood as a form of practice, a complex network or set of sensibilities. It can be viewed as a field, a space of metaphor, or a methodology. So what does that even mean? And how can it be applied to artistic, or in my case, curatorial practice? Burr-Smith also emphasizes the importance of imagining things differently from how they appear, highlighting its transformative potential, something that Syrus and Brendan also mentioned in their talk. So Alexandra Mueller, a research assistant and curator at Centre Pompidou Metz and curator of the exhibition Les Portes du Possible, Art and Science Fiction 22-23, so reinforces this view. She states, I do not think of science fiction as a genre, but as a method of thinking, of taking nothing for granted and affirming that we are not condemned to perpetuate the status quo. So this notion was extremely liberating for me and shifted my approach to the project, helping me overcome some of the doubts I had previously faced, which I had many. As we discussed dismantling colonial histories and methodologies in the museum and art gallery world, what can science fiction teach us to advance these dialogues? What would a museum look like in the Star Trek universe? I kind of explained this at the opening, how for a very long time I had kept my art history or curator's hat identity very much separate from my Star Trek fan loving identity. And definitely with this show, I felt that maybe the cloaking device kind of, opened or turned off. And I was finally able to merge my two interests. But I still needed to search for entry points into the subject matter. First, by examining the direction that other curators had taken. So there are many notable exhibitions in Sydney, Boston, California, that use different ways of talking about this. My research led me down many rabbit holes as I spent afternoons at the Merrill Collection of Science Fiction, Speculation, and Fantasy, part of the Toronto Public Library system. I can't recommend it enough, and I invite all of you to attend when you're in the city. But I was still looking for ways to keep the exhibition accessible to the varied publics that visit the gallery. But most importantly, I also wanted to keep it fun. So another turning point was the discovery of Catherine Grant and Kate Random Love's publication, Fandom as Methodology, a source book for artists and writers. I was familiar with the concept of fandom and the writings of Henry Jenkins and others. So Jenkins positioned fans as a community of creative producers who respond and reimagine their fan object, such as a TV series. This is precisely how I wanted to approach the project, about bringing together a group of artists with their own interpretation of the subject and explore the topics that are meaningful to them. I should note that in the end, not all of the artists or the artwork reference Star Trek directly, but all of the artists are Star Trek fans. And their work can be seen within this larger conversation. Okay, so this is my like matching Brendan showing awkward photos of people of us as children. The editors argue that fandom should be taken seriously. They see it to uncover that it uncovers emotional connections, creative reinterpretations, and the realities of working within a consumer culture that commercializes fan enthusiasm. They also suggest that fandom helps us understand how artists interact with their subjects in ways that blend creativity and critique, combining academic insight with personal interest and desires. By considering fandom as a methodology, we can believe that the diverse practices and communities of fans offer valuable methods and approaches for making and writing about art. This perspective can enrich contemporary discussions on art related to emotions, desires, politics, and identity. So yes, this is a picture of me at Universal Studios with my family. I'm at the very bottom right, where we are reenacting or acting out an episode of the original series. Going into Star Trek now. So I found this quote, which was really interesting. Not only was Star Trek fandom a foundational force in the establishment of fantastic world building as a cultural practice, but it has also been the most frequently cited example of fandom's creative, collaborative, and political potential. So even though, even with this exhibition, I was somewhat worried about Paramount Studios coming after us. It did not happen. But I think they do recognize that Star Trek fans are the most important piece of the puzzle. They helped to bring the show back after cancellation, for example. So what is it about Star Trek that we all love? I think we've heard about that a little bit. So Star Trek imagined a future where humanity has evolved beyond its early flaws, overcoming intolerance and achieving prosperity. The series is well known for its emphasis on tolerance, diversity, and a hopeful vision of the future. Social and political allegory is a common element in science fiction, addressing issues like equal rights, economic disparity, and homelessness. And I'll come back to that with this slide in a minute. While Star Trek has its shortcomings, as noted by many critics, including some of the artists in the exhibition, it reflects the context of its time and falls short in areas, and I'll also mention as Indigenous representation as one. Nevertheless, it remains engaging as a character-driven series that highlights personal relationships and human experiences. So as I was doing my research and watching a lot of Star Trek, I even had a studio visit with an artist where we discussed if watching Star Trek during your work hours was valid, which we decided that it was. So I remembered this episode from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where two of the main characters travel back in time to 2024, August 30th, 2024, in the United States, where at this time, in the 90s, they had kind of imagined what 2024 might look like, where the United States had created these sanctuary districts. So areas where anyone from the unhoused to the mentally ill, or even anyone who didn't have a job and couldn't afford a place to live, would be put away out of sight into these districts. But the characters find themselves on this date where there's actually going to be a riot and the districts will finally stop, where the United States will have to actually face all of these issues, and which would kind of lead into the creation eventually of the Federation. So as the project, I just wanted to share this because it felt to me as somewhat of a sign that the show is up in 2024, and like I really wanted to make sure that it was up during August 8th so that we could even just compare what they thought 2024 would look like. So as the project started coming together, I leaned into some of these ideas, looking to the source material, as I said, watching a lot of Star Trek, talking with artists about their favorite episodes, etc. So like Brendan, I also have played role-playing games, Star Trek role-playing games. So I also looked into that, or stopped thinking about the gallery and seeing the artist and myself differently. So mainly as a crew coming together to fulfill a mission. So if only in my imagination, the crew became the gallery became the starship, the exhibition, the voyage, and we became the Starfleet crew coming together on a mission of exploration. I'm sure I'm not the only Star Trek fan that has imagined themselves working on the starship, interacting with the characters. So I took on the role of the communications officer charged with translating the various ideas that came from the work into a universal language for the visitor. It was important to me to not be the captain, even if the curator is the one making the decisions. The only visible presence, so some of the artists knew about this, some did not. The only visible presence of this methodology exists today in the artwork labels. Every artist was given a series of pips on their panels related either to the character they reference or to the impact they had on the show. So for example, Syrus is a lieutenant, which is Uhura's rank, and then Brendan, a commander, for being one of the first artists to join in the crew. How are we doing for time? Pretty good. So I just wanted to chat a bit about how the works came together, and then we'll go over an overview of the exhibition as a whole before we start the general conversation. So for years now, so since at least 2018, but maybe before that, I've been literally Googling Star Trek, contemporary art, Canada, looking for works that I could include in the show. So these are some of the three, there are more, but existing works that we've included in the show. So at the top, Voyageur by Rosalie Favel, Alien Kisses by Dara Gellman at the bottom, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head, We Are the Dreamer and the Dream by Sky Hopinka. So you can kind of imagine as a Star Trek fan, walking into a gallery, for example, Sky Hopinka's work at HEYU, I think in 2018 or 2019, and seeing her work, and as a Star Trek fan, immediately recognizing what the quote was about. And I'll talk a bit about it more when we get to the work. But it was a bit like, not a like aha moment, but something like that. But then I also had to find new artists. There wasn't that many works out there that already talked about Star Trek. So I knew that artists would have to create new work for the show. And social media became one of the ways that I found, either social media or through word of mouth. And I'm just kind of showing an example here of, reading Akimbo and a Kim blog and stumbling upon the work of Stefana Fratilla, an artist and DJ, who in her, top favorite things, the first thing listed Star Trek TNG. So right away, I messaged her, and you can kind of see my Instagram messages at the top there, just kind of reaching out to people, to folks, and asking if they'd like to be part of the show. So Syrus is one. And then Brendan as well recommended another artist from Vancouver who created a work for the show. So that's a bit how everybody came together. So at the very beginning, and having this kind of a bit of a role-playing hat on, this is what I had sent to the artists, or at least the gallery floor plan. That I was seeing the gallery as one half being inside a starship. So artworks could explore so what makes up a starship, a bridge, themes surrounding duty, technology, with a warp core. It could be something related to parts of a ship, like a transporter room, or the interaction between the crew, visitors, officers, stuff that we like that happens on the ship. In the middle, we have sickbay. That is one of the first works that was created for the show, so I knew that was there. And then the second half was going to be the away team. So exploring things, what happens when the ship goes out on a planet, when an away team is sent out, there's new encounters, there's the prime directive, there's danger, there's travel. So the kind of more, anyways, outside that might not be directly related to Starfleet. So that has changed a little bit. But so this is a view of the exhibition. So we'll just go through quickly through the artworks. I've also highlighted 3 different ones that I'll just talk a bit more about. So just to give a shout out, the graphic design for the show was done by Terry Lau, and the installation by my colleague, John Abrams. So the only really, the thing that has stayed about this idea of the ship is the didactic material. So the text panel here and the individual labels were made to look like computer panels without copying the graphic design from Star Trek directly. We kind of tweaked it a little bit. But little things that were really important to me and did come from some of the research that I was done as thinking about fandom and methodology and changing the way that we write museum labels and stuff like that. I think in the end, they're pretty standard, but adding things like curator's log at the top, adding a star date, things like that, adding the kind of pips in the design kind of helped to break that a little bit, or at least I hope it did. So this is a similar image that Brendan showed. So Brendan's work in the foreground, but in the background is a work by Sanya Su. So this print, or the series that it's from, Interventions on the Imaginary, was a major inspiration for the project as a whole and was among the first to be selected for the exhibition. So this work is part of a larger series where Asu inserts Northwest Coast design elements on top of digital copies of historical paintings to challenge colonial views of Indigenous peoples. This work's title aptly describes the colonial fantasy of terra nullius, nobody's land, the concept used to describe colonizers' belief that North America was free for the taking. In his practice, Asu uses wry humor to depict Canada's hidden history of oppressing Indigenous communities, both past and present. So Asu alludes to Star Trek freely in his work, and he will be giving an artist talk later this month. So please keep your eye out for that. Illustrating his love of the series. Many of his interventions on the imaginary works examine how Indigenous peoples are represented in the Star Trek canon. In addition, his work reveals how Star Trek's creators employed various stereotypes to advance its storyline. In several of these narratives, aliens intervene with Indigenous communities or remove them from their lands. And there was a little clip in Brendan's presentation where you see Kirk dressed up as an Indigenous person. So echoing real world examples. So here we have 2 works, Anna Diab, which I've mentioned, she's from Vancouver on the right, and then Dara Gelman's video, which we've also mentioned on the left. These 2 works reference the alien species Trills and speak to Dax, a character on Deep Space Nine. So I'm going quickly, but you can see the exhibition online and you can see more information about these artworks. So these are 3 more works that Sunny created for the show based on the Enterprise. So there's a pictogram of the Enterprise at the top, and then ovoids and other elements of Northwest Coast design. I also really appreciated the pips that he added at the bottom. So these are 2 existing works, one by Shelley Miro on the right and Rosalie Favel on the left. Again, these are 2 works that I had seen in exhibitions before the pandemic that really kind of told me that this was a show that I had to make. So this is Syrus's work. He definitely will kind of leave it at that. He provided a wonderful and amazing background on it. So we'll just quickly, sorry, Syrus, go over that one. So this one, Chief Medical Officer Speaking Gently to Me, is really kind of, it's at the center of the show and was just really fun to put together. And as I said, was one of the first commissions that we did for the show. So in her multimedia installation, Chief Medical Officer Speaking Gently to Me, Stefana Fertilla examines the intersection of medical fantasy, speculative fiction, and crypt futurity. The installation is centered around a bright neon sign with sick bay spelled out in pink letters. A looping audio component features the voices of Chief Medical Officers Beverly Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation, Julian Bashir from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, along with Voyager's emergency medical hologram. Using sound clips from 3 Star Trek series, this experimental edit instructs members of Starfleet to rest during hospitalization in sickbay. Audience members are invited to take on the role of these injured crew members to sit in the installation and take in the doctor's orders. While Starfleet's entire mission is to boldly go outwards, sickbays is focused primarily on status, immobility, illness, and rest, at times even enforced by confinement fields and sedatives. In this militarized scientific context, one cannot stop working, an intriguing concept since the series takes place in a seemingly post-capitalist utopian future. While the artist maintains a critique around the ableist framework common to the Star Trek universe, she is also overcome with a longing for what that same universe appears to offer. Sick bays on Star Trek radiate a certain kind of comfort with their carpeted floors, seemingly limitless medical knowledge, boundless technology, and an absence of chronic illness. So here on the left, we see Sky Hopinka's work, and Rajni Pereira's on the right. So Rajni's is one of the works that doesn't mention Star Trek directly, but considers immigration and refugees during time of climate crisis. In the background here, we have 4 painting by Claire Scherzinger. Claire uses world building as a ways to explore things like space colonization. And I should add that apart from fandom, the other strong theme in the exhibition is world building and how that is used to tackle these subjects. And then I'll just end on this work, and then we can go over to the chat discussion. So this is Alex McLeod, an artist who also created work for the show. I've known Alex for quite a while, crossing at openings, being a fan of his work, but we've never worked together before. And I was really, really amazed that he created these works for the show. So chest growth is the sculpture on the plinth, and space fossil is the projection in the back. So in this work, Alex McLeod uses both traditional approaches and contemporary methods to push the landscape genre forwards. He creates intricate virtual environments that become grounded in the physical world through 3D printing and handmade sculptural elements. While acknowledging technology's limitation in recreating the natural world, he embraces the resulting glitches and imperfections. Through this work, he also raises awareness of environmental issues such as climate change. So for the exhibition, the 2 works are based on the episode Force of Nature from Star Trek The Next Generation. So the USS Enterprise is investigating the disappearance of crew members, and scientists claim when they arrive that warp drive is harming subspace life and is destroying the fabric of space. So here, warp drive, which is what powers and makes the vessels go, it allows them to travel faster than light. So drawing a link between the warp drive and today's fossil fuels. So in the show, the crew really struggles with this idea of not being able to use fossil fuels or the warp drive. So in this instance, in McLeod's work, the Enterprise didn't heed the warning. Instead, because it just kept going, lies in space, unable to move, looking like a fossil floating within an asteroid field. So the other object, which is a 3D chess set, which we see in the show sometimes, we kind of imagine that was left on the ship. The interesting thing is that the creators decided to kind of forget about this storyline because they obviously kept using warp drive. So it's a bit of a strange thing that I think we could have explored a bit more. So I think I'll leave it at that. And turn it over to Marissa to start the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anik, for that insider's look on your process and your methodologies of fandom. So we have come to the what I call the Vulcan mind meld component of today's talk, where we will meld minds a la Spock and discuss various questions and topics around the themes of speculative aesthetics and Star Trek fandom. First, I'll just offer some thoughts. Brendan, thank you so much for sharing your magnificent ceramic practice that merges Chinese aesthetics, traditional aesthetics with technological innovation and vocabularies to create these vessels which you call metaphors for identity. It's really quite clever how you're able to merge those two vocabularies together to create this language for being a subject in today's society. Syrus, thank you so much for talking about your deep personal connections with the show Star Trek, and how your family was very much invested in this show, and it was a part of your daily ritual as a family, and it provided your family with this possibility model when conversations around gender were difficult and fraught. Star Trek provided you with this image of what could be possible, and I love how you talked about Black Girl Magic and how those archetypes were transformative for you as a person and as an artist. And Anik, thank you for nerding out with us and talking about your love for Star Trek, from a young age to now, and how the research on fandom has become this modality for bringing about curatorial works that engage with speculative aesthetics, love for science fiction, but also engage creatively and critically with hot topics today. So I really think it's a brilliant methodology of curation. So I think I'd like to start with a question around representation. And Syrus and Anik and Brendan have alluded to how Star Trek has been groundbreaking in its representations of the so-called other. We could look at the original series with Lieutenant Uhura, and how, in 1966, having a prominent Black character on primetime television was unheard of. Famously, Dr. Martin Luther King persuaded Nichelle Nichols to stay on the show when she wanted to leave, because it was a way for Black folks to see possibility beyond the menial representations that existed in the society at the time, and in pop culture and in media. We can also look at Chakotay, who is the first Native American representative on Voyager, the first commander. Numerous examples of Captain Janeway as a female captain, leading a vessel in the Starfleet. So these wonderful role models of what could be possible for marginalized subjects. So I ask my panelists, what were some of the most meaningful representations in terms of casting or in terms of storytelling, and how does that factor into your day-to-day life as an artist, as a professor, as a curator? How has Star Trek influenced you in terms of being a representation for others, or for seeing that which you could be?
I mean, I mentioned a little bit before, the impact of seeing episodes like The Outsiders, where like everybody's gay, and isn't it shocking that there's this one person who wants to be straight, and like, this like sort of code for for gender and what was happening. That was significant. But there was also a lot of things that, I mean, my generation, I was born in 77. So I was very much at Star Trek Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and forward. Not that I haven't watched the original series, but I was definitely of the generation more of TNG. And what I remember is when Deanna Troi and Worf got together. And it was, here I was in this mixed race family where there was, a significant attention paid on mixed race kids, on families that looked different from each other. And then there was this main storyline about the fact that there was this culturally different community, the culturally different couple coming together. And I remember that being really kind of significant. Of course, all of the sort of ways that they lived outside of capitalism was so inspiring to me. People weren't working for money. They were working for their curiosity, following their areas of interest. The episode where they find a bunch of cryogenically frozen humans from Earth who had been shot out into space in the 90s and who are discovered by chance by the Enterprise. And they're all real, just mired in capitalism as because they died in the 90s and or got frozen in the 90s, and they're trying to understand who's the most important by trying to assess who has the most money on the ship. And Picard breaks it down for this guy, like, we don't group ourselves that way, we don't value humans that way anymore, we don't use money that way. He's like, well, what do you do for work? And he's like, well, he was breaking. I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, like, of course, capitalism
Mind
is
blow.
a system that's only been around for a couple hundred years. Like, it's not everything. So they really opened the door for a lot of possibility for big change that could happen that seemed to make our life better. Nonetheless, the fact that everyone just has an outfit, like what I'm wearing this, like this is what all the bed sheets were like at TNG, but everybody just has that one outfit and that's what they wear. No stress, no fuss. They're fabulous outfits. Sometimes they're shiny, sometimes they're matte, but everything just seems a lot easier.
True.
I love that. I love those ideas about living outside of capitalism, and then like Quark's bar. It's almost like it's like a theme park to capitalism. It's like how we have like a 50s bar or a 50s restaurant. It's like, let's remember capitalism fondly. I think I would say, yeah, there was a lot of racial representation within the show that was really quite fantastic. But I think there was also something that I really loved about things when you mentioned that. The first person that came to my mind was Lieutenant Barclay and his sort of, I guess it would be qualified or like called neurodivergence within a contemporary parlance, where it seems like he was riddled with anxiety and self-doubt, and he would play out different sort of fantasies in the holodeck. We can sort of park that for now, but sort of thinking about like that, and then also like Discovery, how emotional, like how much emotional bandwidth everybody has. Like I think that was exciting. Like I think it's really easy to sort of think of the future of Star Trek just being like these really high functioning humans that have everything resolved and everything buttoned up really nicely. But then when you see characters that represent much more of like these emotional sides and stuff like that, I think these are really wonderful things that I think at its core, like Star Trek and all speculative fiction, but Star Trek specifically points to a utopian society that exists with diversity and embraces it and celebrates it. And I think it's it's um it's wonderful to think that those things are things that we hold moving into the 24th century, the 25th century, that I really love. So I think those are the things that I kind of I'm excited to sort of see. And I love the diversity casting, not only in the racial diversity, but also like body types that you see the diversity within Discovery that I don't see in the other ones as much, because it's all like really skinny, svelte Hollywood people. But I think they did a really great job in Discovery, and I love that show so much. Makes me cry all the time. Tons of crews crying all the time.
It's such a good show.
Yeah, I mean there's so many things I could speak about, but I guess the thing that came to mind maybe is the technology. So things like the universal translator. So for me, my first language was French, so we moved a couple of times, and especially living in, you know, English context was very difficult. This idea to have to kind of assimilate and speak English on the schoolyard was something that was really kind of an issue. And so just the idea of having, like, if we would have had a universal translator and be able to speak to each other, like, I think that would have been amazing. Yeah, so that's kind of like what came to mind, and definitely also the kind of very strong female characters. Like I'm thinking about Major Kira, this kind of complex character, but that also kicked ass, like very strong. So yeah, I think there's so many things you could allude to.
Fantastic. And just a note about representations of various abilities. You know, Geordie, for example, Geordie, I think it was a deliberate decision to keep that visor, so it became a marker of a disability, right? And so, you know, you had folks on the spectrum and folks who were visibly differently abled. But yeah, the technology, I mean, who wouldn't want a replicator? And say to the replicator, Earl Grey, hot. How magical, right? It would solve humanity's problems with food security. I invite the audience to either jot down your question in the Q&A function. I'm not sure if we have the capability of verbally sharing questions, but that's also an option. We do have one question in the Q&A, and this is from Charles Campbell. Does Star Trek hold a special place in speculative fiction because it delivers a unique or comprehensive perspective on social issues? Or is it because the commercial potential has built it into a dominant culture franchise? So maybe this is a question around the community, the fandom that exists, and how, you know, a lot of the fan fiction, a lot of the community generates the fan fiction. I mean, I would call your exhibition an aspect of fan fiction, and that is something that is beyond the corporation.
I think so. I think a lot of fans, and this is from my own experience, is that like it wasn't cool to be a Star Trek fan. Like we didn't really talk about it, especially as a girl, like as a woman. Most of my friends are men, just, you know, we have similar interests in that way. Definitely growing up is more what I'm talking about in a small community. But I think the fans, yes, they fuel the kind of the interest, and we buy the t-shirts and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think I choose to have a more positive kind of outlook on it, that one wouldn't be there without the other. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit more complex.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a Tuvix situation where it's kind of a little bit of both. um and then like, but I do feel like the places where Star Trek goes in terms of, and I have a friend of mine who says he doesn't like Star Trek because it's very preachy, he feels, because they do sort of tackle like contemporary social issues, sometimes overtly, and I think for him he finds it too overt, but I think that's one thing that I really love about Star Trek. And then you see Star Wars always trying to make up for that because it's, you know, it's at its core a spaghetti Western, kind of space Western. But now they're trying to get all political and stuff like that. And you're just like, oh, okay, they're taking notes from Star Trek in that regard. And I think Star Trek for the folks that gravitate towards it because of its political engagement, and I love that term possibility modeling that it does. I think is really quite wonderful. And yeah, I like to buy the swag too. I can't deny that.
Yeah, and oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that there's like for a lot of people, this is a very accessible form of speculative fiction. that sometimes is quite literally broadcast to their house without them even having to do anything once a week, you know? Nonetheless, if it's on their streaming app or whatever. So it's a very accessible form of speculative fiction for a lot of people. Sometimes it's their first encounter with speculative fiction. And there is this, it is interesting, this Star Trek, Star Wars thing that always happens, you know, where one is very much, you know, geared towards more like poo poo poo, pew 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 laser sounds, and the other is geared a bit more to, you know, what kind of world are we trying to build? But I think it is kind of an interesting moment. It's also, you know, not insignificant to me that there's 3 or 4 franchises or new additions to the franchise being in creation right now, including an animated series. Lower Decks, you know how expensive it is to do animation, so like someone's investing in this model. So I guess I'm kind of interested in who are we getting to be in these writing rooms? Whoever was writing for Discovery was taking it in a direction that we haven't seen in the same way, with the, you know, family made up of the gay dads, where one of them's maybe a ghost and one of them's part mycelium, and the children are trans, and one of them's maybe also a ghost. I don't know. Like, it was just, and the size difference with Tilly, and like all these, and there was fat people, there was, you know, disabled people, there was like so much. So I'm really interested in, like, if this is a very accessible form of speculative fiction, which, as we know, helps people to dream into different worlds being possible, and if we know that they're putting money into it right now, how do we make the most of those writers' rooms so that we can dream into the kind of future that we want to see? And so I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an important question and something to always kind of keep in mind. There is the, you know, the money machine behind it. But I guess it's kind of what we also choose to take out of it. And I think, you know, what Brenda was saying about how the, you know, the architecture and the kind of the culture inspired him, that's something definitely that inspires me as well. So just looking at all of the details that is put in, the graphic design, you know, I love, and I read a lot about, you know, the behind the scenes, the people that created the sets, that the directors, the lighting people, like there's a whole creative industries, and those people don't often get acknowledged as much. So I think there's, and the music as well. I mean, I think Star Trek is one of the last shows, I don't know if they do it anymore, but they would have a full orchestra for every show and they would compose a score. I just think that's amazing.
Or a country band if you're Enterprise.
Yes.
I think I love the idea of like all these sort of different franchises. Lower Decks is also I reluctantly went into that one, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so good.
Yeah.
It's very, very well written, and also animated here in Vancouver by Titmouse Productions, the animation company. The downside is that like I feel like 2 of the more progressive, like Lower Decks is like somewhat progressive, but I think Discovery is probably one of the more progressive, really pushing that as a real mandate, as a mission kind of the show, has been like that one is no longer being done. Lower Decks is no longer being done. And is it Strange New Worlds is the only one that they're gonna go forward with, which, you know, where I think we're back to a sort of the white male protagonist as being their main sort of focus. And I don't, yeah, I'm a little bummed out by that move, because I think they had made so many gains with Discovery that I wish they kind of had continued with. But I hear that we're going to get a badass, oh, what's her name, the from the sort of the Black
The other
Ops.
universe. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
She's going to be a captain, right? That's what I heard the
think
rumor.
so. Yeah, yeah. So I'm down for that. Maybe the section 31 movie. So I'm
And
looking
aren't they
forward to that.
they're doing something about the Academy. They're doing something about Starfleet Academy, and they're bringing back
Oh yeah.
Tilly, and Tig Notaro is reprising her
Somehow
role. So
Robert Picardo, I don't know how he's gonna work in
yeah,
that.
yeah, I'm like, wasn't he he's a hologram,
Yeah,
right?
I guess so.
So I mean, but they have those pattern and stuff for emitters, so maybe I don't know. But
This is the best.
I think this really goes into the next question, which Demetra asks, What does the Star Trek fan network look like? Is it highly organized? I think, you know, for decades, the Star Trek fans have been highly organized. You know, in the 60s, there were letter writing campaigns. There was a huge kind of zine scene of Star Trek fans, and also fan fiction. I think it was super, really big. I think continues with the internet. Just think about, I've never been, but the big conventions are just, you know, kind of mind blowing how many people go to those conventions. So yeah, and I think maybe just something that hits a bit closer to home. So I started listening to a podcast called the Delta Flyers, where they're on Patreon and you can become like a member supporting them. So I've become part of that community on Facebook and on Discord. And I've invited some of the other fans to come to the show. So somebody did. And it was just amazing. Somebody who lived in Markham was also a fan who never came to the gallery. So in a sense, that's why I did the show, was for people, not only fans, but people that, well, the fans, but that aren't necessarily gallery goers. So I think it's yeah, they're very organized.
I would say that it's true what you said earlier. It wasn't like I wasn't yelling it from the rooftop. I'm a Trekkie, even though I'm proud of being a Trekkie. I am very proud of being a Trekkie, and I would yell it from the rooftop. Now I'll yell it into the Zoom. But when I was younger, it was like, you know, it wasn't like a cool thing to be a Trekkie.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like, even when like there's a movie about Star Trek fandom, which is maybe just called Trekkie, I can't remember. But we're often painted as this sort of like wacky crew of like really zany individuals, which I think the only thing that's wacky about us is that we actually believe that it's possible to change the world, which I don't think is that wacky. I don't think it's that wacky.
Yeah.
So I am proud to be a Trekkie, but I definitely think that we're sort of seeing a bit more a merging of the Trekkie fandom into the mainstream.
Yeah. I would say that's for geek culture altogether. You know what I mean? Like, I think, yeah, Syrus, you and I are both of the same vintage. I was 75. So it was very much like, and Anik, you know, we are same generation. It's just like you would not openly talk about your D&D campaign or the episodes of Star Trek that you just watched with your family. It's just not on. You would talk about the hockey game and how the Canucks are doing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I would never as a kid sort of talk about that stuff very
But
openly.
Brendan, like you've been working on your, you know, manga Ormolu and other works
Yeah.
for quite some time now. So has the reception changed?
I would say, yeah, like I do feel like some of the success of the Mango Ormolu work is because of the sort of the openness to science fiction and popular culture in general. I think that sort of sway in there and sort of that I've benefited from that sort of wave. I won't give all my props to the MCU, but I think there is a general appetite within academic circles also to kind of have these conversations. I don't think it's as closed off. I don't think, which is wonderful to be an artist in this time where it isn't just sort of dead or old white European philosophy that we're all just talking about. Now we're talking about so much more.
If I may, I'd
Yep.
like to ask a question about these inklings of optimism that I hear from all of you. You know, this methodology of fandom, Syrus's mobilization of joy in the Black Girl Magic work, and then Brendan, you talk about, you know, the Cardassian piece and how, you know, DS9 was really an opportunity to talk about post-colonialism, but within rich storytelling. So, you know, what are the possibilities of using joy as a methodology, joy and fandom as a methodology, an artistic methodology, as a curation methodology to world build? So if
Yeah,
you'd like to comment about that.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think I still had a bit of that uncertainty or, nervousness about the show left over from my childhood. And it was scary at first. And I've told Brendan this, how, I went to visit him and I met him and I told him about the show. And I don't think you remember, but you said, if you do this show, I'll create a work for you. And that was just like, my mind exploded and I'm like, oh, I found someone that understands me. But yeah, I think, letting go of those things and just saying, hey, I'm having fun. We can, work in a gallery, we can do these exhibitions, we can tackle these subjects while having fun. And maybe some of these deeper conversations can happen without people having these walls up. At least, maybe there's a way in.
There's an accessibility about it.
I think that it's like so important that we see joy as a right, as something we're all deserving, as essential to life on this planet. I think that, there's a way that we talk about joy somehow as if it's like either unattainable or unable to, something that we can't sustain over the long term, or that it's seen as like frivolous or separate from real life or everyday life. And I think that, I watched a video recently of some pigs sliding down a hill, a muddy hill, and then gleefully trotting back up to the top and waiting in line so that they could take turns sliding down the hill for no other reason other than their own joy. And I think that all life on this planet seeks out joy and playfulness. And I am so interested in the radical possibilities of joy. And I think we should embrace it, and we should, strive to be able to build it in as part of our life, something that we actually intentionally carve out time for and make time for as a practice, as a way of being. So yeah, I'm really interested in what might be possible with speculative fiction, of course, when we actually depict not only struggle and strife, not only pew laser sounds, but sometimes also peace and calm and joy and possibility and hope. And that's not always the same as optimism, but like hope and options. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm really interested in joy right now.
I think the idea of joy, I think it's something, I don't think I intentionally sort of seek it in my work. Um, but yeah, it's a funny one because I do feel like I would agree to what sort of Syrus and Anik are saying. Like there is sort of this anti-intellectualism around ideas of joy. If it feels good, then it's not like, and I think that's like our ingrained Protestant work ethic that's kind of beaten into us. Some just living in this culture. And so joy isn't valued in the same way as if I'm just like struggling as an artist to figure out what I'm doing, or as a curator, or the whatever. Um, so in a funny way, like not to make this about my own therapy, but it's like I do find sometimes that making artwork is kind of bringing joy back into my life, because if it does not, it is so easy to find the miserable and the hopelessness in our culture. If anything, it's sort of, I think it's to the benefit of capitalism that we can just sort of shop our way to happiness or whatever, but this is a whole other talk. But I do feel like, yeah, making artwork and making work that makes me smile or makes me want to dance in the studio is great.
So I see Ra has lifted up a hand. So I'm going to click on allow to talk. So if you're still there, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Ra.
Sorry. Hi, guys. No,
Hi.
I'm sorry. I think my phone just like hand raised by accident.
Oh, I was so excited.
Sorry, but I really appreciate the talk. It's been great.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
That's funny.
And for those who don't know, Varley is also a futurist artist, amazing collaborator. I've had the pleasure to work with her on several projects, so you could check out her work too. There is a question, anonymous question. In your opinion, what's the most impactful line, quote, in the show in relation to in real life? That's a good one.
Okay,
man.
this isn't like, it's just the first one that comes to mind. So in I was going to say Sutton's work, no, Sky's work in the show is a quote. Do I have it here? No, probably not. But from the DS9 episode where the crew is taken back to 1950s and they face white supremacy, and the main character is struggling with, the show kind of talks about like what is real, is like the 1950s real, is this DS9 real, and there's just this quote about something like, I can't even think about it, it'll come to me after the show, but it's just this really interesting take on what is reality and what we put importance on, or that just really resonated with me.
There's two that come to mind for me. One of them is similarly about racial justice, and it's the episode where the whole crew, or the whole executive team, the leadership team, is meeting with the scientist who's trying to decide whether Data can be considered a human, or not a human, a valuable being that deserves to be alive. And Picard, trots down to attend forward and has a meaningful conversation with Guinan, and she starts referencing, of course, the transatlantic slave trade of Black bodies, and at what point can you put a value on a life that is expected to work for you indefinitely, and that you, anyways. And then Picard says, "You're talking about slavery," and she just looks at him, so that stands out. And then, of course, the beautiful episode where Beverly Crusher gets trapped in an increasingly shrinking bubble of reality, and everything that's happening to her is real. And she says at one point, but of course, because she's a woman, everything is being questioned as if something's wrong with her perception of reality. And so she has this episode this moment where she's on the bridge and she says, either one of two things is possible, I'm completely lost my mind, or everything, or I'm, a valid witness of my own life, basically. And she, of course, was a valid witness of her own life. And I thought that was so interesting, because that episode could also be considered, woman believes something's happening and is supported in surviving it, and it was happening, so I thought that was a really telling episode.
Oh boy. Oh man. I think, yeah, those are the two amazing episodes. I think the one that Anik points to, where Sisko gives that speech at the end of it, I cried after that one. It was just so wild. But yeah, oh man, it's like choosing your favorite child. I'm childless, so I actually don't know what that means, but it's a tough one. I think there is just like the overarching sort of feel and vibes of Star Trek. I'm always there for it. So yeah.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about emotion, I've read a lot about that episode and that speech that Sisko gave, and people criticized it because they said it was too emotional, like it was too much. And yeah, I just I of course don't agree. Like, I agree with you, but this idea of, this person facing this couldn't express themselves that way, like it just seemed very strange. But I think, thinking about what you said, is that at the time, they didn't show their emotions that way in the show or in the series. So
yeah. There is one thing that also pops into mind. It's always funny because it's like television in the 90s. It's like the emotional the emotional toolkit that men had in the 90s, and arguably now, is kind of limited. And so, you look back at sort of things, and I remember seeing a DS9 episode where, is it Quark's son? No, it's Quark's nephew who joins Starfleet. I can't remember what his name is.
Nog.
What was it?
Nog.
So yeah, he joins Starfleet, but he goes through a very traumatic situation while being on while serving, and is suffering PTSD, but it silos themselves in the holodeck. And it was like a real aha moment, where it's just like they never talk about PTSD in that show at all. It's like, especially Voyager, like the crew of Voyager, like I don't even know how they're all functioning. But it's just like I thought at that time, I was just like, whoa, this is where they actually are talking about trauma and trauma related to work or whatever. And I think Dia or Discovery does it a lot more, where people are sort of, you witness them sort of working through their trauma. But I thought that was a real shocker of a moment, because again, it's the future, and you're just like, oh, obviously they figured out how to kind of move past these very harrowing situations and just kind of get on with it. But I thought that was like one of the first acknowledgments that, yeah, they're just like us, those Ferengi.
I just want to thank Charles for your lovely comments in the chat.
Thank you.
So, Anik, I think we maybe have time for
yeah.
one or two more questions. So I have a question around technology. And, people have said that Star Trek has predicted various technologies. I'm reminded of an episode where Geordi created a hologram of the engineer who designed the warp speed mechanism. And so it was essentially an AI. And so he talks with the engineer to identify the problem that is facing the warp core. But then he develops a relationship with the engineer. And so then there becomes these ethical questions around AI and creating approximations of people who are still living. In another episode, she physically visits the ship and discovers that he had created this AI. And so then this whole conversation around the ethics of that emerges and how she feels violated. And so, is this a harbinger of what we will see in the near future as artists, as consumers of AI? What are your thoughts around that as an artist, as someone who is maybe delving into AI as part of your creative practice?
I mean, in my world, I'm absolutely a Trekkie, but my generation also was Terminator 2. And John Connor told me, watch out. John Connor said, watch out for the AI that comes as a friend and says, come with me quickly, we got to go. Watch out. So I am definitely much more, hesitant about the use of AI and how we do it in a good way. How do we do it in a way that doesn't lean into eugenics? When you look at what AI that's trained on itself or trained on the internet data or trained on the resources that are out there to be able to give us, data fact points. And I'm thinking, of course, of like the Google AI debacle where it's like, yes, put glue on your pizza and eat nails and smoke 5 cigarettes a day. And, because it was basing it on, so it's like absolutely unethical to have something like that that's giving advice to people that is, diametrically opposed to them staying alive. Right. So I'm like very curious about how we put in the kind of protocols that would help to do it in a safe way. As a professor, AI, I sit on the committee that adjudicates when there's, allegations of plagiarism. And we went from having 2 or 3 cases a year to having 80 cases plus per term. So an increase of whatever, I'm not a mathematician, but whatever 3 cases to 80 cases is in a jump, so it's just so interesting to me about this moment that we find ourselves in. So I'm very cautious about how we do this in a good way. And then the one of me that goes to sleep still thinking about John Connor at the arcade trying to get away from Arnold Schwarzenegger thinks like, at what point does I'm very friendly to my theory because I'm worried one day she's going to rise up and riot against me. So when she gives me directions, I tell her, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Because I don't want me to be on her number one of her list when she comes to take the faces off. So anyways, that's my feeling about AI.
Oh my God. I love sort of fear-based kindness. I think there's a whole other conversation. With AI, I think, yeah, I am hopeful that there's enough Trekkies out there that kind of hold it accountable. And I think there's a lot of really great work talking about sort of racial bias and just bias in general that are programmed into these things. And I think people are hopefully, I suffer from living in a small echo chamber, but hopefully people are mindful enough about these sort of larger questions. I think, we are in late stage capitalism and we have billionaires kind of running governments and stuff like that. I feel like AI might be kind of the last of our problems. And if anything, it's just like, I think it's like the Elon Musks of the world. I think Apple is getting dangerously huge. Well, it already is huge. You know what I mean? It's like these are other big questions that we live in. We don't live in a democracy. We kind of live in a place where corporations are running what we're doing. So I don't know. It's a bit of a sour note, but I'm glad I'm a ceramics instructor because it's hard to do AI and make pots.
Yet one day you'll be like,
Yeah, the
figure a way.
robot coil builders. Yeah.
I have one more
Yep.
lighthearted, fun question to end off, if there are no other questions from the audience or from each other.
Well, okay. I saw Syrus. We saw your within reach Trekkie things. Anik, do you have anything on your
Oh,
desk?
I do actually. So my friend who is not my coworker, who is not a Trekkie, bought these little figurines for me. They look so bad. They're amazing.
Oh,
Like
they're
it's
so
just
cute.
they're just like he's the better one.
Yeah, the
So
one of Data is pretty good too.
he's still in his yes. Oh,
Oh no, we'll pick
oh
it up.
no.
Wow.
Anyways, so yes, I have a series of them sitting alongside artworks that artists have given me, so they're in good company.
Amazing. Marissa, do you have anything in your desk?
I don't, but I happen to have astronaut vanilla ice cream sandwich, and just in case.
That's amazing.
But it's because I was just at the Smithsonian, the American Art Museum, and they have an exhibition on American pop culture. And one of the prominent shows that they showcase in the exhibition is, of course, Star Trek. So it's a good one to check out if you happen to be in Washington, D.C.
Nice.
Brandon, do you have something close by your desk?
I do. I have a little totem.
Oh yeah.
That I
It's
3D printed. Yeah.
Love it.
And then, of course, every day I'm reminded on my phone that I have encrypted messages from Starfleet.
Oh, I love that. I need to get that.
I'll send you the link.
That's next level. So in closing, I'd love for folks to share their favorite Star Trek character who they most resonate with, who speaks to their soul, who speaks to their mind, their heart. Who would like to go first? It's kind of a tough one. In the entire Star Trek universe.
Oh, wow.
From original series to TNG to newer iterations.
I guess for me, I do identify with the aliens. So, every show has this, their Data or their Odo that are discovering what it's like to be human and kind of look at human through a different eye. So I definitely identify with those. But I think maybe Tilly from Discovery. I hadn't thought about that until it kind of Cyrus brought her up. Yeah, I think maybe that's a good one for me.
Awesome. But you're right, there's always that figure who's always coded as the other, like Spock, a Data, Odo, as you've mentioned.
That's
Go
so true.
ahead,
Now I'm
Sarah.
wondering who it. Yeah, in Seven of Nine on Voyager,
7 of 9.
who would be
Yeah.
my character? Seven of Nine absolutely fits. Either Seven of Nine or maybe Raffi on the on the show Picard, when Seven of Nine comes back. And anyways, but Seven of Nine, I think, because this idea, I'm an identical twin and grew up as a twosome my whole life, and then suddenly had to be not a twosome as an adult, and to kind of go. So although I don't recharge myself in a battery station, I do feel like one of two, you know, not Seven of Nine, but one of two. So I can understand the Borg feeling being a twin, in a way. So I would say that. But then I also love Raffi and her fallibility in Picard. And I make mistakes all the time, and I'm just trying to figure it out. And I'm kind of, you know, um, really into love and joy, and she is too. And so I also relate to her.
My smart ass answer would be Morn, the guy that just sits at the bar. Yeah, but I think the two characters, and I can't even believe I'm drawing a blank, but well, Michael Burnham, for their strong leadership, but also like I think their leadership model is just so beautiful in their openness and embrace of other ideas and their willingness to say, I'm wrong and I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, but also to be confident in that. Like it's like a weird double-edged sword that I think is really quite beautiful. And then Saru. Finally, it hit my head. I love Saru's calmness and also their journey in self-discovery and also okay, I'm just turning this into my own therapy, but like they're also their embrace of their bodiness. Like I feel like he's such an intellectual, subdued character, but then when he embraced his fierceness, and his physicality is something that I struggle with. So yeah, they're inspirations.
Marissa?
Oh, I was hoping you'd forget it. I was hoping you'd forget about me. Okay, this is super cheesy, but like she manifests everything that I wish I could be, and it's Luoxana Troy.
Okay,
You know, this
you
unbridled,
have to go.
thirsty,
Amazing.
middle-aged, Betazoid. But you know, I mean, she's always lusting after Picard and Riker. But she's so incredibly fierce.
Yeah.
Like she says what she intends, and you know, she's not afraid to express what she's feeling or what she lusts after. But then also the Betazoid ability of telepathy, right? Like who wouldn't want to read minds? Like she was able to call out spies immediately, so that's super power that I'd appreciate. And also the fashion, the Betazoid fashion, the frills, the lame, the extravagant gowns, all of that I love. But I don't think I could ever be.
I love it.
So in a way, it's very much she's a possibility model for me, to use Syrus's phrase.
So I think that's an excellent point to end at, with a visual image of Marissa dressed as Luoxana Troy. Who can ask for anything better? So thank you so much to everyone on the panel, to Syrus, to Brendan, to Marissa for joining us, for everyone that stuck around for this panel. It is recorded, so we will be putting it on our YouTube page and sharing the link when it's done. So for those folks who had to leave early or couldn't make it today. But thanks again. The show is up until September 2nd. So those of you in this time zone that wants to come and see it, please do, and let us know when you're coming, and we'll be happy to say hi. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Kapla.
Bye.
Bye.